Hi guys, Tech Boy here with another video. This video is all based around Apple's predictions for 2013. What we expect to see, what we don't expect to see so much, what will be the high points, what will be the low points of the year. Basically, the whole presentation is all going to be based around the actual products that we expect them to release next year, and what we don't really expect so much, including the iPads, iPhones, iPods, Apple TVs of some sort, the whole Mac range, and other software items. So let's get into it. The first one is obviously the iPad. The fourth generation iPad is basically, as I viewed it, an incremental update that was done halfway through its life cycle, because they've always been 12 months and this was done like 7 months after the original one, after the third generation was announced. And how I see it is that the iPad with Retina display will maintain the same name as the previous generation, except it will be the fifth generation to be able to tell it apart. But the really key features that will differentiate it will be the fact that it will be thinner, lighter, it will probably have the same backend as the iPad mini, and it will probably have the same thick border like the image on screen at the moment, because it's so recognizable worldwide. Because if they changed it, it's going to look so much like the iPad mini, and no, it will be harder for everyone to tell apart which one's which. I also expect it to have near field communication. More details on that in a moment. Also, Apple's A7 chip, which is a sequel from the Apple A6 chip, which was a dual-core processor, but I expect this to be quad-core for the central processing unit, which will make it twice as fast. Also, the camera on the back, it's probably going to be the same as it's been previously, except it will be bumped up from a 5 megapixel to an 8 megapixel camera. iOS 6.1 is basically just going to be, I don't know, more languages for Siri, maybe the odd extra feature or something like that. But it's going to be nothing revolutionary or really outstanding. But I also expect the pricing to remain the same, but the storage for each of the models to double. Why is this? Well, 16 gigs has been around since the original iPad, and everybody these days, Retina displays, a lot more content, HD movies, everything like that, takes up more and more space. And if they want to get people to download more and more stuff to help developers, they're going to have to put more storage in. Now, people don't really want to pay extra for more storage, but if they offer a 32 gig instead of the 16 gig, it might entice people to more likely to purchase an iPad. As for the release date, I might stand out from the crowd, but by saying that it will be released in March 2013, because the fourth generation was really the iPad 3S, with the S being like the incremental update. It's almost like they do a major one every couple of years. In this case, for the iPad, it's probably going to be at the start of every year, of all the main changes and all that. With the S model, was really just designed to make it more competitive with the Microsoft Surface and all that, by putting in a faster processor, faster Wi-Fi, more LTE support. You get the idea. Next is the iPad mini, second generation. That was only just announced recently, and it is a great product, but it is lacking a lot of key features that its older brother has. But what are they? Retina display. This definitely needs a Retina display to be able to sell more, but by doing so, it might make the device a bit thicker. Now, I don't think it's going to be a huge increase in thickness, but I expect it to be at least thicker than the first iPad mini is. It will probably get the A6 processor to be twice as fast if the iPad 5th generation gets the A7. It'll probably get near-field communication, iOS 6.1, but it will maintain the same pricing as 16 gigabytes for Wi-Fi and all that, just to have another key differentiator between the two. As for release date, I also expect it to be released at the same time as the iPad 5th generation. Next is the iPhone. In my opinion, I really think the iPhone 5S is what I'm calling it at the moment, is probably going to be the most interesting product that they will be releasing next year if you base it on hardware at the moment. I've been seeing the iPhone 5 as though it takes all of the core elements that the iPhone 4S had, but it does them all a lot better. So, for example, with cellular data, it's now LTE compatible. So instead of 3G, it's 4G, and with the screen 3.5 inches, now 4 inches, so on and so forth. So what am I expecting? It's going to be the same design because it's going to be just an incremental update of everything on the inside. I mean, it's thin enough anyway, because if it's going to be a lot thinner, they're going to be a lot more fragile. But I also expected to have the A7 chip, near field communication, a camera probably with the same specs that it's already got at the moment. Apple may surprise us and put in a couple of extra filters or something, you never know. Maybe something different than the sapphire crystal cover on the back, because that's made a lot of purple images when you point it at the sun. That's been a bit odd. But I also expected to bump it up to at least 12 or 14 megapixels at least, since they went from 8 megapixels on the 4S to 8 megapixels on the iPhone 5. I also expect a longer battery life, and if it's not really much more energy efficient, I expect it to have wireless charging to be able to have another way to charge the devices more quickly. I also, like with the iPad 5, expected to start at 32 gigabytes as the base model, and then so on and so forth, with 128 gigabytes replacing what the 64 gigabyte model was, and all the pricing stay the same. But then they'll probably do like a Steve Jobs thing. They won't necessarily say it as a one more thing, but that's what they were sort of implying when Siri was launched. But with this, I see iSecurity as a really good way to go, because they've recently filed a patent for fingerprint scanning, and they've bought out a company called Orphan Tech for a ridiculous sum in the millions, which specializes in fingerprint security. Now, this was bought before the iPhone 5 was launched, and there was no security in it. So I expect it to be included in the next iPhone, and maybe iPad or something after that. But it will probably be on the iPhone 5S first to help sell it better. More on that in a moment. The iPods, they really got a major update this year, but I don't see it really changing that much next year. Like it did in 2011, they all just got slightly incremental, not very noticeable changes or something, or stuff that you might get if you downloaded a software update. So what am I expecting? Well, the iPod Shuffle at the moment is only 2 gigabytes, and I think for a Shuffle that is starting to get a bit small, considering how much they're paying. So I would imagine they'll bump it up to 4 gig. For the Nano, I think they'll offer a 32 gig instead of 16, or as an alternative, keep the 16 gigabyte model, but they might make it $20, $30 less to keep it further apart from the iPod Touch. Speaking of that, I'm expecting they'll make a 16 gigabyte 5th generation at $249 US, and by doing so, they'll remove the rest of the 4th generation models from the product line, and they'll just put in iOS 7 or whatever when they release it, if they release it at the same time. As for the iPod Classic, they cost $279 at the moment with 160 gig. I see it most likely getting more storage in it for those people that like to store all their music on the device but charge the same price. As for a release date, probably in September or October, more likely September, because that's when Apple usually does its music events. Now the Apple TV, this one's about the box at the moment. It needs to be a major update recently, because they brought out a first generation many years ago, then the second generation came out in September 2010, and it's a quarter of the size of what the first gen was, and then it got an incremental update with 1080p support in March 2012, but nothing really dramatic. What Apple's gonna have to do now is probably keep the same design as they've always had, but they'll probably put in 2K and 4K support for resolutions. Well, what is this? Basically, you've got HD TVs at the moment with 1920 by 1080 pixels on the screen. This is going to be a ridiculous amount more pixels. You're looking at twice or four times the resolution of what you've had previously. Also, I'm expecting they'll slightly redesign the remote, but not huge. Not a huge change. Probably just put a small microphone in it or something, so they can enable Siri support with it. So you could control the whole box with Siri instead of having to click all the buttons and all that. I'm also expecting them to put in a personal video recorder service where you can record your free-to-air content as it's on the TV and then upload it to the cloud, or as an alternative to a hard disk drive that's on your Wi-Fi network connected to your wireless router, or like a server, or to your computer on your computer network. If they do this, they better offer at least 50 gigabytes of iCloud storage at a discounted price, but paid it through the Apple TV. Because if you bought it through the iPhone or an iPad, for example, they'll just think it's a cheap way of getting the data and all that, when there's probably not as much benefit to having so much thing, and it will be more enticing for people to have it if it's 50 gigabytes for the Apple TV. What else? Apps. They are well overdue. I'm not expecting any apps like Angry Birds that's revolutionary and all of that, because imagine if you had a multi-touch screen and all of that, and playing Angry Birds touching the screen, or your 6-year-old kids and all that. No, that won't work. Basically, there'll just be simple apps like anything that you can imagine. You see all these, which also ties into the next point I'm making about a lot more content. You see all these Roku boxes around at the moment. They've got tons and tons of content, but if Apple puts out the SDK for app developers to be able to make apps for the Apple TV, they could be able to use more content and provide more content. As for a release date, probably September, October, same time as the iPod, just taking a guess. As for the Apple TV set, now if this ever gets released to the public, it is probably going to be the reason why Apple will become a trillion-dollar company for the first time in commerce history. I still believe that such a device does exist, but I am not personally going to make any predictions of what it's actually going to have. I mean, if I had to, I would probably say apps, personal video recorder to the cloud, Siri, will probably be the way you control the TV itself, internet browser, a different input method like hand gestures with a camera or something. 3D is probably not going to be in it because that was a novelty, even though Avatar was a good film and demonstrated good use of it. As for a release date, at the earliest, probably late 2013, because we're not hearing much about it at the moment. And generally, when a product's about to come out, you hear a lot of rumours going around. And if you're not sure when all these rumours around and all that, just Google the product itself. But if it doesn't come out next year, it'll probably be early 2014. And I'm seeing it as though they're releasing a new product every 3 years, because the iPhone was announced in 2007, the iPad was announced in 2010, so this is presumably going to come out in 2013. Just taking a guess. As for Macs, they did get quite a substantial update this year with the 13-inch MacBook Pros getting Retina displays, but I don't see anything dramatic happening next year to them. The 17-inch MacBook Pro will probably get a Retina display towards the end of the year, and most of the Macs throughout the year, they'll probably just get a spec bump, which is just more RAM, faster CPU, but it's nothing groundbreaking or anything revolutionary or evolutionary. iTunes 11 just came out recently, and I love it. After a few weeks of using it, I still believe it's the best piece of software for managing and finding great multimedia content on a computer. iTunes 10 came out in 2010, but I believe that we're not going to see anything new or dramatic next year. If anything, it's going to be like a 11.1 update or something, because an 11.1 update will basically give support for iOS 7 when that's released. It will probably have a lot of more bug fixes. It'll probably be faster at loading stuff. And the thing that was quite disappointing was that cover flow, which you can find on your iPod Touch or your iPhone just by turning the device in the music app. You can see cover flow and flick through your album covers and all that. That's being removed, and a lot of people are upset about it. So obviously, if there's demand for it, they might bring it back. As for a release date, probably the same time as iOS 7 to release them simultaneously. And then they might release an 11.2 update when iPods come out, so they can obviously support the iTunes software. iOS, this is going to be the biggest, most important thing Apple has done since the Tim Cook era started. iOS 5 was quite a good update. iOS 6, not so much. All they really did was add a few extra apps and just improved a lot of others with a few little tweaks, like FaceTime. You can now do it over cellular. That's all it really is. But there's really two reasons behind this. One, it's starting to get boring. We've had this since 2007, and all that the home screen's really had since then is just a wallpaper. That's it. I'm really starting to get bored with it, and I'm expecting more interactive stuff and like widgets or live icons, anything imaginative. But the other reason is that Johnny Ive is now in charge of design for all of the software services including iOS and Mac. Ever since Scott Forstall, who was senior vice president of iOS software, has lost his job just recently over the whole trauma of Apple Maps, and boy, that was very costly for the company, I will agree. iOS 7 needs to be significant enough to be able to compete with Android and keep things fresh and up to date, because if it's the stale thing, it's going to be less appealing to the customers. So what am I expecting? A redesigned home screen? One thing that drives me mad is that there's always a set grid for apps, so it's always top to left, right to left, top to bottom. But if you wanted to put a photo or something, why can't you just put all your icons around the outside of it so you keep the picture in the middle or something? Just putting it out there. And also, I want to see a new way to unlock your device. This could also be with the fingerprint security. Just hold your finger on the home button or alternatively on the screen, and in a couple of seconds it will unlock. Just as a different way of not having to put a passcode in or type a worded passcode or anything like that. And then redesigned applications needs to be done, like Calendar. They're starting to look a bit pale and simplistic and kiddie-ish, you could say. They just need a overhaul. One change I would recommend is like with contacts, for example, you could put the images of people's faces next to the actual contact itself when you scroll through them. Widgets. This needs to be a major change next year because everything's going widget, widget, widget. Everybody's jumping on Android. Everybody's loving widgets. They just need to jump on it. But Apple has been always key on simplicity, which is why I'm thinking with Johnny Ive in charge, he'll really think of a way to do it. I'll be putting a link in the description regarding a person's idea on what it's all he believes will actually be implemented, and it really seems like a good idea. So have a look at that. Number 4, more customizable or updated notification center. So like change the background, more widgets, extra buttons, anything like that. And I'm also expecting true multitasking. Android's done a good job of this, but the problem is that it drains the battery quickly. I'm sure Apple will find a way of running multitasking in such a way that it won't have an effect on battery life, but will almost give you the option of running it in the background if you want to. Because if you don't want to run stuff in the background, then there's no point trying to kill your battery too quickly, because then that's just darn annoying. Also, I'm expecting some improvements to the camera app. They always seem to do this every year. Not sure exactly what they will do though, but one thing that I've found recently that seems to be really annoying is that you can take photos while recording videos, but it's basically a screenshot. So if you're doing it on the iPhone 5 at the moment, it's 1136 by 640, which is nothing anywhere near close to a 8 megapixel camera resolution. It's more like a less than 2 megapixel resolution photo, if you get what I mean. So I expect them to be able to increase the technical specs to be able to allow that. Also, a dramatically improved maps application. So obviously more accurate maps. Yeah, that makes sense, Apple. Yeah, very funny. Implementations of public transport without needing to switch to separate apps. It's been annoying and this should be fixed. Updated Passbook app. Now this is what I'm really looking forward to. With near field communication, basically you hold your iOS device close to a object or something and it can react in some way. For example, in Melbourne we use MyKey for public transport, which is basically a card that you tap on a surface to when you get on and get off public transport. And if you did this with a phone, it would A, not require a card, and B, be less space to take up and all that. Many people would argue it's just a card, but then again, it's probably just as convenient to use your phone if you're flicking through pages and pages on the internet and all that, and you come to the station, you can just quickly multitask in the other app and scan your device and then go back to the other, so on and so forth. Also, with Passport, they could finally implement like a wallet system, but by doing that, they need to use fingerprint security, because you could use a wallet system, but by doing that, it's not very secure with a mobile device, because if they get stolen, somebody can hack into your account and all that, and you lose thousands and thousands of dollars. It's just not really secure. So the only way they could do it is fingerprint security. So you scan your device with your thumbprint or something every time you want to make a transaction on the device itself. So that I'm really looking forward to. And then 9, finally, is something we don't really know what we want, but we'll not be living without it when it actually comes out, because that's what Apple likes to do. They like to surprise us. One thing that really caught me off guard and surprised me was guided access in iOS 6, which is locking apps into a single mode, so children with autism, they can't accidentally hit the home button or something. And then children, when they do tests on their iPads and all that, the teacher can lock it into a single app mode, so the kids have to do their test, so they don't go and look up the others in Safari. Obviously, so it's cheating, and then the curriculum and all that, you get what I mean. As for the release date, there's two possibilities of what could happen. If iOS 7 is first previewed in April or May 2013, then it will most definitely come out with the iPhone 5S in June at WWDC. If, however, iOS 7 is first previewed at WWDC in June, then it will probably come out with the iPhone 5S in September. But I still somehow believe that the first statement is true, because Apple will want to get back on a WWDC launch for iPhones like most of their phones have, and this would make sense with what looks like an incremental update and not a complete overhaul like the iPhone 5 was. But that could be argued either way. And finally, Mac OS 10 10.9 is obviously going to be the sequel to Mountain Lion, and that was a modest update, but it's hard to see where it could go from here. However, there's been rumours and stuff going around, and the three that we the internet and everybody is almost certain to see would be Siri integration, Apple's maps, obviously improved before they put it in, because why would they put in a rubbish one? And the redesigned apps that Johnny Ive would design for iOS, they'll also bring that over to the Mac to make it more seamless and smooth. As for the release date, probably the same time as iOS, the same for previews, releases, and all of that. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Your question of the day is, what are you most looking forward to next year from Apple, and why are you looking forward to it? Is it like the iPhone, an iPad, an iPod, anything? Do you really want to see an update in iOS? Anything like that? And you can leave a comment in the section down below. And please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for watching.